Hey, Scott Lara 1961 on Twitter, thecruisegenius.com, at Scott Lara 1961 on Instagram. So this morning, walking around my Lennar neighborhood, want to talk to you about different job titles that I have. Now, many of you know that I'm a travel agent, so I sell cruises, all-inclusive vacations, and so that's a cool job title, being a travel advisor, travel agent, whatever. Sharing my passion of cruising and all-inclusive vacations with my family and my friends on the social media channels. So, travel agent. Another job title I have, I talk to doctors about welcome home care and how welcome home care can help their businesses, right? See how the lighting is over here. Oh, okay, that's better. How welcome home care can help their businesses, how they can help their patients, how welcome home care can be that one-stop shop for them where we can come in and if they have a patient. So that's another one of my job titles. One of my favorite job titles that I have is that of being a lobbyist. And that's kind of the cool one, because when you tell somebody you're a lobbyist, 9 out of 10 people have never met a lobbyist. Scott, where does the word lobbyist come from? Good question. In the early days of our country, guys like me, who are lobbyists, would hang out in the lobby of hotels and train stations, waiting for a member of Congress to walk by. I guess you could call them stalkers, but that's what they would do. And as members would walk by, hey, Congressman Smith, hey, Senator Jones, XYZ. Now, many of you would think that lobbyists are high-paid professionals with law degrees, wearing $25,000 suits, $50,000 watches, flying around in corporate jets from here to there, whining and dining elected members of Congress at fancy restaurants with $10,000 bottles of wine and $1,000 Wagyu steaks. That's partially true. And that's the fun part of the job, is getting to do all that kind of cool stuff. But did you know that actually you're a lobbyist? Let's say you own an Airbnb, and there are regulations out there that are threatening your business, that the city or the state is levying or attempting to levy fines or levy taxes upon your small business. You're just a guy out there trying to make number one, you're a guy out there who may have a home, and you're trying to provide a service to businessmen and women and families and the military who may come into town. And you're offering your home at a very reasonable price, a price that's less expensive than a hotel. And number one, you're an entrepreneur. You're trying to maybe make a couple of extra dollars. Number two, you're providing a service to people who can't afford, a hotel. I mean, you look at hotels. Yeah, you got the Omni. You got these ones, $150, $200, $279 a night. And then you have like a Motel 6, or you have one of these ones you rent for like a week for $2 something, and it may not be very safe. So you're a homeowner, and you have a home that you want to run maybe a room or maybe 2 rooms or a whole home. So you're saying to yourself, wow, I mean, I know about maybe doing my Airbnb, but I don't know anything about, talking to city councilmen or the governor or mayor about my Airbnb business. So you go down to a city council meeting and you testify before city council at one of their open hearings. You've just become a lobbyist. Okay, well, maybe I don't have an Airbnb, but maybe you have a favorite movie, right? The new Star Wars movie comes out, or the new Jason Bourne movie comes out, and you can't wait to tell your friends, man, Tommy, you gotta see this Airbnb. You're lobbying. You are trying to influence people to do something that you either want them to do or something you're passionate about. Now, when you think of a lobbyist, you may think some high-powered person making hundreds of $1,000s a year, working for the NRA or Planned Parenthood or AARP. Yeah, you got those guys. But you too can be a lobbyist too for whatever issue is passionate to you. Let's say, I don't know, you're passionate about folks who may have limitations, right? Like physical limitations. The Centers for Independent Living down there in Winter Park that Brittany works at, you know, she lobbies, she talks to people about the folks she helps. You know, like she does these ramp builds, right? The Center for Independent Living does these ramp builds where they build ramps for people. They may have a manufactured home, or they may have a place that the person, because of a wheelchair or whatever. So what happens is Brittany will go out to these construction people and say, hey, listen, you know, can you donate X? Can you donate Y? And then she'll talk to companies about maybe donating people to come on out and swing the hammer and use the saw and the axe. And so she's out there lobbying on behalf of people who don't have a voice, right? And when you think of AARP and all that stuff, I mean, AARP is big. You have millions of senior citizens and more every day because of the baby boomers. And so you got AARP lobbyists lobbying on behalf. That's another story. We won't even talk about that. AARP is not one of my favorite groups because they really sold out seniors, in my opinion, during the Clinton years and Obama years, and you know, their HMO and everything. But like with home health care, I've been lobbying for home health over 20 years in Washington and Tallahassee. Years ago, I went to Tallahassee to talk about home health care and before a Senate health care committee, and also been to Washington many times. One of my favorite stories about Washington, a friend of mine and I went to a congressional hearing regarding paperwork reduction. And at the time they were Congress, well, not Congress actually, it was the healthcare governmental agency, HCFA back then, now CMS. And they mandated that we do all this paperwork when we admit a patient, right? It takes a long time. And what are nurses out there to do? Nurses are out there to take care of the patient, maybe help with a wound, or a physical therapist is actually trying to get the person up to move them around after a knee surgery or a shoulder surgery. But the government mandated this thing called OASIS, where our nurses had to go in and spend, I mean, like over an hour answering all these questions, very personal, very invasive questions, just so the government can have an idea of what's going on out there. So anyway, this very close friend of mine and I went up there, and to be honest, I forget whose idea it was, but I think it's probably my friend Dwight's idea to actually roll up the papers like in a big roll, right? And just kind of imagine a toilet paper roll, right? All rolled up. And when I testified, my friend actually unrolled it around the whole hearing room, congressional hearing room. And the chairwoman of the committee said, let it be stated for the record in blah, 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 that the OASIS paperwork is being unrolled in the Congress, in our chamber here, and it's stretching all the way to the George Washington Bridge, you know? So that was kind of a cool thing to do to demonstrate how Medicare was putting this on us. It was an unfunded mandate, right? They mandate you to do something, but the government doesn't reimburse you for the nurses or for the time. So that's what we call in our industry an unfunded mandate. But going back to lobbying, right? It doesn't have to be a high power, high paid person to be a lobbyist. Anybody can lobby. If you have an issue, you have a passion. Let's say, you know, maybe, you know, pets, you know, or dogs or cats, and you're concerned that they're being inhumanely treated. You know, you can talk to your members of Congress about that. You can talk to them about, you know, pollution or something. Maybe you live near an area that's not clean, you know, like Flint, Michigan, right? You got the water there. Lobbying, telling your elected officials what the problem is. A lot of times just regular citizens think, well, you know, I can't do that. I don't have the words. I'm not articulate. I'm just living my life. I just go to work every day and do what I do. Well, I encourage you, if you have a passion for something, or if there's something that bothers you, I mean, you can reach out to me, email me, slayer1961@gmail.com. Tell me what your passion is, and I'll be happy to talk to you about it, help point you in the right direction. But for home health care, which is my job, we talked to a couple of folks that I work with, talked to a member of Congress yesterday about some issues in our home health care industry, and he was very receptive and very open, and he understood exactly what we were saying. And the one thing, I'll give you a couple tips about lobbying. Number one, you got to be concise, right? Cut to the chase. You have all these years of experience, and you're trying to data dump it into somebody else who doesn't really know either your industry or your background or what's going on. So you just have a couple bullet points, right? 1, 2, 3. And the number one thing you got to do at the very end is what we call the ask. Congressman Smith, I'm requesting you co-sponsor H.R. 1342. Now, the one thing about a member of Congress, it's very rare when they'll be the first one to stick their hand up and say, I'll be the one to champion this cause. They're looking for other members of Congress who have stuck their hands up so they can get in behind them, right? Kind of like that kid in school, right? You remember him? Come on, Billy, let's skip school. I don't know. Well, Billy, me, Tommy, Trevor, Atlas, Timmy, Joey, Marcus, all of us are skipping school. Join us. Let's go. What party? We don't need to be here at Escuela. So it's going to make Timmy easier to say, well, you guys are skipping. Well, heck, kind of same way with this, right? If a member of Congress sees that other members of Congress are on board, a little less, not sticking your neck out there as much. Well, these guys agree with it? Well, I agree with it too. So that's something you want to show a member of Congress or a city councilman or whomever. Hey, your colleagues agree with me. Hey, can you agree with me too? The second thing you need to do when you're lobbying, representatives need to run for office every 2 years. House representatives, right? Senators, they run every 6. So imagine this. I have my jobs, plural jobs. What if I had to go to my boss every 2 years and say, hey, please let me keep working for you for 2 years. Here's what I did lobbying. Here's what I did with the travel agency. Here's what I did with the home care part of my business. And you got to justify to your boss to keep you on board, right? That's what members of Congress have to do. Every 2 years, they have to get permission to go back to Washington. Now I'm going to ask you a question. What is the number one thing a member of Congress needs? Yeah, you may say votes. That's a good answer. Number one thing they need is dinero. They need money. The average member of Congress needs to raise about $50,000 a week to have a war chest to prevent somebody like a Scott Lara to run against him, right? So let's say you got a member of Congress and he's doing his thing, but he's not out there raising money, and I'm looking at his FEC report, Federal Election Commission report, and see he's only got $50 or 100 or 250 or $1,000 in there. And I know I can get my friends to write me checks for 1,000 or 2,500. So I've got my friends who are going to pack my war chest, and what I'm going to do, start running ads, start going to run Facebook ads, going to start signs, shirts, postcards, all this other stuff, so that I can go out and beat Representative Smith so I can have a seat, so I can have a place of power in Washington, D.C. So the point is that, number one, they need your money, but number two, they do need your vote, and then number three, they need you walking around knocking on doors, right? They need knocking on doors saying, hey, like in my neighborhood here, right? I remember when Governor DeSantis was running, I was on knocking on doors with friends of mine. Hey, vote for Governor DeSantis. So just going back to my point about lobbying, whatever your passion is, if it's home health care, if it's a tourist issue, if it's a pet issue, animal issue, if it's your Airbnb, whatever it is, you're actually a lobbyist and you didn't even know it. For your next cruise, vacation, or all-inclusive vacation, slara1961@gmail.com, thecruisegenius.com, Scott Lara 1961 on Twitter and Instagram. Peace.